Today, I'd like to talk about loneliness. Now, loneliness is a big thing. Even at the best of times, really large portions of our population are struggling with loneliness. And it's often hard to admit to loneliness. There seems almost like there's some baggage around it. And yet so many of us are feeling lonely, even in, we might live even in a crowded city and we still feel lonely, a lot of us. And I wanted to talk about loneliness today in particular because I'm recording this right in the middle of the coronavirus outbreak. And where I am in England, we're on complete lockdown. So anybody who lives on their own is actually really forbidden from seeing anybody else. And it's been like that for a good couple of weeks, and it's likely to be like that for a while. And so this issue of loneliness seems particularly pertinent at the moment because people are actually condemned, really, to staying alone. And that obviously has an impact. I mean, loneliness has an impact anyway, but to be unable to access the kind of friendship support, family support that one would often be able to kind of reach out to and maybe see people in person or go to events to try and just get around people. It's not possible at the moment because of the lockdown. And so I thought it was particularly appropriate to talk about loneliness in this context. But even if you're listening to this, way after this has ended, I think loneliness is such a thing in our society that it will be useful for you, whenever. And the thing about loneliness is it's a public health matter, I think, because we know that the feeling of loneliness does actually impact our bodies, our physical well-being. There's all sorts of studies on this that smoking a whole load of cigarettes a day is actually less harmful than loneliness to our physical bodies. And so it's important, first of all, for us to kind of be able to get some access to other people. It's an important priority, I think, in our lives that if we do feel lonely, that we try and come up with some remedy for it by finding ways to build friendships and build connection and make sure that we're around people and, just take some sort of steps, have it as a kind of high priority, really, as something that would be a big part of your focus as to what needs to change in life for your own well-being. But as well as that kind of reaching out and trying to change our state from lonely to having connection, especially given as that's impossible at the moment in terms of the way we would normally have connection, actually being in another person's company. I'm going to focus this episode on the other piece to that, which is what do we do in the meantime before we've actually changed life so that we're no longer lonely. And of course, that's a situation that a lot of people are actually in at the moment, that they can't actually reach out. They can't have that companionship that they might be able to seek out. They can't have other people around. And so I want to look at the other piece, which is how do you actually help yourself during these periods? And the thing I particularly want to focus on is an issue around safety. Because human beings, we're pack animals. We were evolved to live in tribes. We're very, very interdependent. And of course, when we first evolved, human beings and our ancestors were actually prey animals. And what happens when you're a prey animal is you become very, very alert to signs of threat. So we're kind of hardwired, really, to be very alert to those signs of threat because it's been very useful to us as a species. Now, when you're a pack animal and when you're prey, when those two things are kind of in combination, One of the things that it's not a very good idea to be is away from the pack. If you look at any kind of wildlife program where it's out on the Serengeti or whatever, you'll notice that those animals that are in a pack, when one of them actually comes away from the pack, guess which animal is in the most danger? If there's lions about, for instance, guess which one the lions are probably going to eat? And so there's something in us, I think, that when we are alone, when we're outside of the tribe that evolutionarily we're meant to be amongst, our nervous systems actually pick that up in and of itself as a sign of danger. It kind of understands, it's been evolutionarily trained to understand that when we're away from the pack, that evolutionarily is a matter of life and death, and we need to get back to the pack as quickly as possible. And so our nervous systems actually respond to loneliness and aloneness as a form of stress. And if you've ever been alone and felt lonely for any kind of period of time, you can kind of tune into this. It becomes like a low-level hum in the body. And this is your nervous system basically registering this kind of sense of danger. And so if you're in that situation during this lockdown, what you're actually going to need here are ways to invite your nervous system back to safety. You know, as a therapist, for instance, if anyone is doing trauma-related work, we never ask them to do the trauma-related work alone, for the simple reason that being alone in and of itself doesn't feel that safe. What feels safer is to be in the company of another person. You know, obviously a person that we want to be with. Otherwise, it obviously won't feel safe if it's someone we don't want to be with. But yeah, to be in the company of another person is something that will immediately kind of help regulate us. We're not these kind of independent, self-reliant creatures, human beings. We aren't really intended to self-regulate. We're intended to co-regulate. And so that's just a recognition of the fact that when we're alone, we're in a sense of our nervous systems don't really like it. Our nervous systems are kind of responding. And not just when we're alone, because obviously sometimes when we're alone, it's nice, isn't it? It's nice to get a bit of privacy, a bit of me time. But I'm talking about that kind of loneliness. And so the reason why I'm going into all this is so that you understand that that jangly feeling in your body is a very natural response to the threat that your body reads in terms of being alone. Because let's face it, if you're alone and you're not happy being alone, like you're actually feeling lonely, you're feeling outside of the pack, then you're going to have a response to that which is programmed, millions of years ago. But seeing as you're not actually in any threat, seeing as that there isn't a lion that's going to pick you off, as it might have done, many, 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 many years ago to your ancestors, this kind of threat response, really, this low hum of kind of chronic danger, isn't actually that useful to us in the way that it used to be. And so what we really need to do is to find ways of bringing ourselves back into a place of safety, where we can soothe our nervous systems back into a place of safety. Now, obviously, the very best way of that is to be with another person who you want to be with. And then we just naturally co-regulate, much like an infant who cries out and is distressed, gets comfort from a parent or, from someone coming and picking them up. We're hardwired for that, really. So the most natural way is to be around people that we want to be around. But in this kind of situation where that's not available to us because we're in this lockdown, and sometimes even in life generally, it's not necessarily available to us, we need these other ways of inviting our nervous systems back into a sense of safety. Now, the way the nervous system responds, it's like an alert system. So it's useful to know how it works, because it will respond to, well, basically 6 different things. Your 5 senses, and also what is going on inside of your body. So if you're feeling jangly, that's actually a cue to your nervous system that things aren't right. It might have set that cue up itself, but for as long as you're feeling jangly, it will continue to kind of be noticed by your own alert system that things aren't right because, look, you feel jangly. So anything that you can do in order to bring that jangliness down is going to be really, really helpful. The other 5 things are your 5 senses. And it's useful to think of it in terms of your 5 senses, because you can use each of those 5 senses as a pathway of returning you to safety. So for instance, what are the smells that kind of make you feel safe again, that kind of relax you, that you notice that there's a relaxation that goes on, that feel kind of comforting? You know, it might be a particular kind of soup, it might be a food, it might be some sort of smell that smells like the beach, or it's going to be different for each of us because we've each had different histories. But it's a good place to start with these senses, to think, well, what are the smells that actually make me feel really safe and looked after? It might be the smell of, you know, a grandparent's house or whatever. There might be a certain smell that they had. It's going to be different for each of us. But that nerve from the nose that gives us the smell is actually one of the fastest nerves. So the information we get from smell is very, very fast, goes to the brain very, very quickly. So if you can find a smell that brings you back to safety, then when you're feeling this jangliness, you can simply smell that and you'll get a very fast effect. Now, the other senses that we've got is like sight. What is it that we can see that calms us? What are the things that we can look at that calm us? Now, for many, it would be, you know, looking at, say, animals. If you look at a cute animal, for instance, that will kind of help just to invite us to safety. There are other things like nature, you know. If you're able to look out of your window and see a scene of green, then that would be lovely. If not, maybe looking at some photographs of nature, maybe looking at an image of the sea rolling in and hitting the beach. And it's going to be different for each of us, but you've got this resource there where you can check out what are the things that you actually can look at that you notice has a calming effect on you. Because if it's having a calming effect on you, then what it will be doing is just returning your nervous system to a place of safety. And then, of course, we've got the ears. What is it that you can listen to that makes you feel safe? Often, you know, it's certain types of voices. What they would often call motherese. You know, the way that you would talk to a dog. Hello there. Hello. What are you doing? You notice that when you're talking motherese, the voice goes up and down and hello. Now that kind of voice, when you listen to that, what they call a prosodic voice, where it kind of goes up and down, hello, in the way that a mother might talk to an infant, or a dog owner you'll hear talking to a dog, that actually, for most of us, will kind of just calm our nervous systems down. Certain kinds of music do as well. What kind of music calms you down when you hear it? You could even, you know, get a friend to speak to you, or even do it yourself. Just record yourself speaking in that kind of motherese, as if you're talking to an animal or talking to a young child, and maybe even playing that back to yourself would help soothe you. Certain types of music, you know, I know that Mary Poppins, for instance, because it was developed for children, and because Julie Andrews, the singer, has a very prosodic voice as she sings, a lot of that music, those Disney soundtracks, are very, very naturally soothing. Enya is another person who's, whether you like her music or not, studies have shown that her music, whether it's the ambience, people like Brian Eno, those kind of musics tend to be very soothing for people. So there's 3 of your senses already kind of where you can actually go and have a check out. What are the things you can smell? What are the things you can see? What are the things that you can listen to that would just invite your body back to a state of safety again? Taste is another one. Maybe there's a certain taste whereby when you taste something, you just feel, oh, that's good. I'm looked after now. I feel a lot safer. I feel a lot calmer. And of course, there is touch. Now, obviously, when you're on your own, it's difficult to get touch. Although those of us who have animals can actually get touch from the animal. Stroking a dog, for instance, is very, very calming. Even looking into the eyes of a dog is very, very calming, as long as you like dogs, obviously. But looking into the eyes of an animal, stroking an animal, pets are really helpful in that sense as well. But if you don't have access to that, there are other things that you can actually do with touch in order to calm yourself. So one thing that the trauma therapist, Peter Levine, does is a type of self-hug where you will put your right hand under your left armpit and you'll put your left hand at the top of your right arm and just give yourself a squeeze. Or it might be that you've got a dressing gown that you can wrap really tightly and give yourself the sensation of a hug. Or maybe it's wrapping yourself when you go to sleep at night, really wrapping yourself under the covers. But what is it about touch for you that would help you just feel more centered, more grounding? In fact, one thing that you can do is just sort of pat yourself, just to remind yourself that you're a boundaried human being and you've got very firm boundaries that keep you safe. Just that sort of, patting yourself down, as I'm actually doing now. Nice firm pats can often support you in just using touch in order to bring you back to safety. Now, again, it's going to be different for each and every one of us. But what you'll notice is that you will have certain pathways back to safety. So when you're feeling lonely, you're likely to feel that kind of underlying danger, that hum of danger, because we're programmed for that. And so by using our senses just to invite ourselves back to safety, it will help us deal with the very worst effects of loneliness while we're in this lockdown. The final thing to say is that giving yourself a reset, anything that will calm the jangle in your body is going to be useful. And that's why breathing exercises are very, very good. It's why meditation people find helpful. These all are things which kind of help just slow down and calm down the jangle in the body. Because even doing that, and of course all those things with the 5 senses will do it as well, but even just doing that, like a breathing exercise or a meditation, resulting in just turning down the volume of that hum, will send a signal to your nervous system where they go, oh, it seems like the danger's over. And it will bring you back to a sense of safety. So that's my invite to you today. I know this is a slightly longer episode than normal, but I thought it was important to be so, because I know people are struggling with this sense of, I'm a mammal. I'm meant to be with other humans and I'm not allowed to be. Is really, really tough for us at the moment. So I want to just take some time to give you some ways in. First of all, to recognise that this kind of weird jangly feeling that might have crept up on you is completely normal if you're in a situation where you're feeling lonely and separated from people. But at the same time, that you have these little ways of looking after yourself that will just return you to a sense of safety, even though your nervous system is going to be going there from time to time. And by focusing on what you can see, what you can hear, what you can taste, what you can smell, ways in which you can get some touch, And also ways in which you can kind of just take time out to meditate or to breathe differently can actually invite your nervous system back to the kind of safety, which means that you will feel calmer and you'll feel much more resilient to these feelings of aloneness and disconnection. And of course, one of the things before I go is that if you are connecting with people through all of this, then one of the things that's going to help you an awful lot is to use video calls rather than text, or even a telephone call rather than text. Because both a video call and text, they will actually provide you with some of the co-regulation stuff that we have, where we just naturally feel safer around another human. When you're texting someone, you're not actually in touch with another human, you're in touch with letters on a phone. But when you're talking to a person, even if it's just a telephone call, or when you're actually looking into somebody else's face through a video call, that invites the body back to safety as well. So I really hope that's helpful. It's a really tough time, this, isn't it? But I hope that there's some strategies of self-care that you can practically use in order to just invite yourself and invite your nervous system to come back to that place of safety. So if you find this useful, and I really hope that you do, please do share it far and wide, because I think a lot of people need this information at the moment. This is a daily podcast that you can subscribe to. It's completely free, so subscribe to that wherever you get your podcasts from, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever. You can see these podcasts on YouTube. Just go to sliceoftherapy.com and it'll take you to the YouTube channel. And if you wanted to work directly with me, I'm Alun Parry from the Liverpool Psychotherapy practice, and you can find out all about me at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. So take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.